Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Victor. This is Jack. So Monday, you should have watched the video where we reviewed a theoretical presentation of what would have happened if Hitler had won. This is the video that we promised that was going to be out tomorrow. We had to switch some things around. You'll see in tomorrow's video. So today's the video where we're going to basically make our own version of that video. But it's actually going to be based on facts and history and that type of thing about what we know about Germany during the 30s and 40s. So this is going to start in 1940. France has been, we'll say, conquered. And this is pre-Battle of Britain. And
okay, so yeah, Dunkirk has just happened. And so the British Expeditionary Force was allowed to escape. And a couple times here, we're going to talk about different things, different ideas that we had to go on. But we chose this one. And so, like right here, I want to tell you how. Okay, so I like to imagine. I just have this fantasy, right? That there's one patriotic person who loves their country in a country, and I know it's fanciful and it's not reality. You can't. Every generation, you can't have one John Wilkes Booth, who's willing to stand up against tyranny. It's just too much to ask. But so in this scenario, we're going to pretend like there's one. Now, we had a scenario where there would have been two patriotic people in all of Britain that the sun never sets on, but that would just be too much. So we're just going to go with one patriot in all of Britain. And in our scenario, a whistleblower steps forward and he releases documents. The documents are communications between Germany and England, and they show what actually happened in our timeline, Hitler's peace plan to Churchill. And it says we'll immediately give back France. We want our colonies back in Africa. The Wehrmacht will help the British anywhere in the world when they're called on. It was a really sweet peace deal. And then we're gonna make up the fact that it had a cover letter on it. And we're going to say the cover letter said, hey, we had thousands of tanks posed at Dunkirk. We had thousands of aircraft ready to obliterate the British Expeditionary Force. But because we want peace for the continent, we want peace for our people, we want peace for France, who declared war on us when we were trying to save our people over in the free city of Danzig. And so all of this stuff gets whistleblown and it gets released. That guy gets arrested and scooped away. Well, the public sees this. And they're enraged because they know that their government's forcing them into a war that doesn't have to be.
And historically, they were very anti-war.
They were anti-war, right. But now they see like, the whole thing's, it's a house of cards.
Right.
Winston Churchill, who the Jews are just completely paying for his entire estate, for everything. He's doing Judea declares war on Germany. He's Judea. But they're like, no, we're kind of Britain. We're Britain.
Sure.
Great Britain, as a matter of fact. And so basically, there becomes extreme protest and like even attacks on parliament members. One gets dragged out in the street and beaten and just different stuff, like not killing them, but like, hey, enforce the will of the people.
Sending a message.
Yeah. And so then what happens with that?
So then the press then comes out, and we know who controls the press. They then say, this is not the people doing this. This is like Nazi infiltrators, and have secret agents have come over, and they're trying to push their propaganda,
and they say it's collaborators, because collaborators is more insulting. It's like you're saying, sure, I'm not an agent,
right?
But I'm now like I'm anti-Britain, pro-Germany, because I'm pro-Britain, anti-foreign control of my country,
Yeah, but I was just thinking, like, we haven't talked about this, but imagine the thought that, oh no, someone's sending agents here, so we're not at war with them. That's so terrible. You know what I mean?
Right. That's interesting. They're infiltrating us because they want peace.
Right.
They're like peace spies. The worst kind of spy ever.
Right.
They like throw like not rainbow flags.
Unicorns
but,
and
unicorns.
Right.
Okay. So then basically that causes the protest to get even more furious.
Because now the press is lying about them.
Right. It'd be hilarious if like they just go bonkers, and then they just start carrying around like swastika flags and stuff. They're not really supporting Germany,
Right.
but it's just like kind of screw you to the. So then, anyways, one thing leads to another, and the Parliament building ends up on fire because thousands of people threw Molotov cocktails at it, not because it just randomly caught fire,
Right.
because they, without wearing masks or anything, are just enraged, and it burns down. It kind of reminds me of a German building that burned down, and who'd they blame for that? Go ahead.
So then the fury, or the Fuhrer, not Fuhrer,
The Fuhrer.
all this negative energy that people have then goes to the press, and the press buildings start burning down, and the people start taking it over, and
the press blames Hitler for the Parliament burning,
right.
which they also did to the Reichstag. That was also the thing they did there. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's, and so eventually Parliament starts, or a subset of Parliament decides that, okay, we need to do it to people. This is out of control. We need to bring peace back.
To restore order, yeah.
That becomes a higher priority to them than, maintaining this fake war footing that they were on.
Yeah. So then a new coalition forms in the Parliament, just enough to get a majority and enough to oust Churchill. So they oust Churchill, and the new leader comes in. It doesn't matter who it is in our scenario, like the other guy did, Lord Halifax. I don't really care who it is. But they just come in on we're going to bring in an era of peace.
Right.
And the new leader has to pardon the whistleblower.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Say that's a demand of the crowd, we'll say, because
Right.
we'll just pretend like there's some good people in Great Britain at the time. We're just pretending.
Yeah.
I just have this fantasy.
But the people give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe he is going to do it. So the unrest kind of settles down in Britain.
Okay, so then I'm going to do the next part because you got a good thought here. So the new leader now is going to make peace.
Mm-hmm.
But he realizes, so in this scenario, you're like, but what happened to the Battle of Britain? Well, the Battle of Britain, so right after Dunkirk, the whistleblower came out. And then all of a sudden there's these massive protests. So the Germans have the Battle of Britain planned, but they're like, well, we want peace with them, and there's millions of Brits out in the street. Well, we can't start fighting yet because we want the peace movement to work.
What if?
They might even literally send infiltrators to be peace spies.
Yeah.
Send money to the, you know what I mean? Like, why not? It's a peace movement. And so the new leader of England, what do you got to lose? Your country's in shambles, flies to Berlin to meet with Hitler at the Eagle's Nest or wherever, where he takes his meetings. What about the reception?
Yeah, so in my head, I was just trying to picture this, and you've got the people of Germany didn't want to go to war. Like, this was not what they wanted either. And now there's this new leader coming in from the opposite side, and I just feel like he would be, the reception of the people would be tremendous.
Massive.
Like, as if he was a hero. And, you mentioned them doing the swastika flags. I could see as many, what is their flag called?
Jacks, the something Jack.
Yeah.
I forget.
As many of those as there are swastika
totally
flags, and the crowds are they're waving both or whatever.
And on every building it's every other.
Yeah, because I've seen those pictures of what it looked like in Germany. And they really commit to the.
They commit.
Yeah.
Right, and so keep in mind that the number one book being sold in this country is Mein Kampf. This is Hitler's book. In the book, it says the permanent strategy for peace in Europe is an alliance between England, Britain, and Germany. It's in the manual. So, like, if you look back and say, oh, this is ahistorical, they would have never... It's in the manual. He sent dozens of peace plans to England, If Churchill would have got out of the way of the British people, all of this is possible.
100%.
So then Hitler receives them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the new leader agrees to all of the plans just as laid out in the historical peace plan, but with one exception. The one exception is you're going to have to fly to London. Hitler himself is going to have to fly to London to sign the deal, to make it look like he's not groveling here in Germany, that he's not begging to restore order over there. And so in our scenario, Hitler agrees. Now, in real history, Hitler doesn't really leave the country, right? He's not traveling abroad, we'll say. In this story, it's feasible. So he shows up in London, and what happens in London?
Probably the same type of reception that the unnamed leader of Britain got in Germany.
Right. because it's peace.
Right.
Peace is a winner, I'll say.
Yeah.
Like kind of like in our anti-war video, remember they didn't want to go to World War II in America because only the bankers and the arms dealers profited.
Right.
Well, bankers and arms dealers are powerful, but they're not in the group of people.
Right.
All the people there are not bankers and arms dealers. They're just people who just want peace, you know?
Right. They're the ones that are going to be sending their sons out to die.
Right. And so basically they, excuse me. So basically they just signed the exact deal. So now the war's over because this is 1940. So in our timeline, Barbarossa was going to happen in late spring of 41.
Okay.
So there's just nobody at war now. Okay. So if you watch our video from Monday, that also means that the U-boats are recalled. And then each U-boat is worth 50 to 60 tanks, a battalion, in metal. And they made what was it, the number?
166 or something like
Yeah,
that.
something. I thought it was 190. But in 1 year, they made that. And so that's how many tanks they can make. So now imagine you're in that same positive scenario that you got in Monday's video with as far as the U-boats go. And there's no Battle of Britain, which means no loss of the Luftwaffe and all of this and all the pilots. And then also think about the advantages from Monday's video when trade is now opened up by sea.
Okay.
So industry can increase because even with the sea closed, the industry was phenomenal. Wartime industry in Germany was phenomenal. But now it can even increase farther than that. So you're getting all the advantages of the other video without having to say, like in his video, he's like, Churchill flew to America and had emergency catastrophic engine failure and was never seen from again. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, you do the next one. This is interesting.
So you missed a little bit of the last section. In that peace deal, France is returned to France, but they're kind of without leadership, that type of thing. So Britain and Germany agree to like a joint overseeing of the country to help them get on their feet again and rule themselves.
Just temporarily.
Yeah, it's just they don't want to leave them in a bad state or vulnerable. They want them to be strong as well.
Right.
So they're trying to get them a good spot, and then they'll remove all their authority and forces or whatever from the country. So then, after this, there's going to be a few summits of the main countries in Europe. So it'll be Britain, England, Spain, France, and Germany.
Yeah.
Italy.
Yeah.
Italy. So 6.
Well, I think it's 5.
5?
Yeah. It's Germany, England, France, Spain, and Italy.
Oh, okay. I think maybe Germany twice.
I think you did Britain and England or something.
Okay,
I don't know.
maybe.
We'll see.
Ignorant American. Okay. So they're going to form a European coalition. And this is going to happen by early 1941. The result of that is that Germany is also going to cancel their economic alliance with the USSR. So the coalition it's a coalition against communism. So it's a united front, and they want to reinforce each other and keep the USSR out of Europe. So that's why they break the trade alliance with the USSR, and no members of that coalition are going to be in trade with the USSR.
Yeah, and I just want to bear in mind, we're not saying that these other countries are becoming national socialists.
Right, definitely not.
They're just saying, like, Mussolini was Italy for Italians.
Mm-hmm.
But just imagine, Franco was saying the same thing in Spain, which makes them a logical partner. And now you got this new leader in Britain saying, Britain's for Brits, And then now you got joint supervision of France. They don't want a leader that says France is for Germans, or you know what I mean?
Sure.
So they're all bound by the same ideology, which is our country for us. Now let's work together in all of our best interests and not for the interests of a foreign minority who lives among us.
Right, who controls our banks and
Right.
that type of thing. So are we implying that they have removed those people from their countries?
Necessarily, yeah.
Okay.
In order to have a country where you can look out to your own interests, those people cannot live among you.
And so they're following the same type of thing that Germany did and sending them to Palestine? Is that where we're going to go with? Okay.
And because I'm way more extreme than Hitler was, and so I'm kind of projecting that on these people, and now they're doing forced emigration.
Okay.
Hitler wasn't strong enough to do. I'm not talking bad about Hitler. I'm just saying he wasn't extreme enough in his ideology to do a forced emigration.
Right.
But he was extreme enough to kill them all. But he didn't want to violate their human rights
Yeah.
of forcing them to leave the country. He just encouraged them, paid them,
Tried to make it look appealing.
facilitated. Yeah.
Right.
Wild. Anyways, so basically what happens is, so you got the coalition, and they're not doing anything economically with the USSR.
Right.
Their goal is there not to be a massive war. And they know that the US has a petrol embargo on Japan. So then what they do is, now in the guy's story on Monday, he had Japan do a surprise attack on the Dutch East Indies to get all their oil, to get all their petrol. In our scenario, the coalition wants peace for their regions. And there's a lot of regions, because we're talking about India, all of Africa. We're talking a lot of regions. And so then they make a deal to sell the oil from the Dutch East Indies to Japan, violate the U.S. embargo, who cares? And they sell it at market price. It's a fair deal.
Yeah.
Now, Japan is not desperate in Pearl Harbor. They're still doing their in China and Manchuria. And then you could keep that now to a regional conflict. It doesn't have to expand because you've taken the pressure off, because the goal is no war. And so in this scenario, FDR probably would have done more drastic, crazy stuff to try to get Japan to war because he was just an insane warmonger. And we had thought about this. One of the ways we want to go here is, how can we save the U.S.? What if in 1940 they don't elect FDR? We looked at the numbers, and it was 300 and something electoral votes to 80 something.
Yeah.
It was a small section of the upper Midwest, and then far Northeast, and then everywhere else, Texas, California, everywhere else went for this crazy warmonger dude. As you're doing all this anti-war stuff, America, sorry, even in our fictional world, we can't find a way to save you.
Yeah.
We cannot find it.
We can't justify changing it that much.
Yeah, it just, you would be like, oh, they didn't elect FDR in 40. I'm flipping this video off. You don't know anything about history. Okay, yeah, so we couldn't do that.
Might as well just put him on a plane and have him crash somewhere.
Right. Might as well. He's on a plane with Churchill and stolen. Okay, so anyways, so Pearl Harbor doesn't happen. Because of this, Japan, because they're doing their regional conflict, but they become an economic trading partner with the people who will fuel them with oil at a fair market price, because you could be gouging them at this point. They'd still probably go for it. Okay. You know? And so now they just become an economic partner because they're out on doing anything economic with the U.S.
Sure.
And the USSR over there. So anyways, go ahead.
Okay. So now we're going to get, just as we did in our current timeline, the U.S. is going to be full of anti-Nazi propaganda.
How is that possible? Who's controlling their media?
The same people that control all the media.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And so you end up with, basically, the U.S. is going to end up allying with the Soviets because there just isn't anybody left. I mean, as far as like major pieces of the world, they've all got these coalitions all over the place that are all working together for their own individual people. And these people still control USA and USSR.
And recall in our timeline that literally everybody in D.C. loved Uncle Joe. They used to call Joseph Stalin Uncle Joe. So what we're saying here is not too unrealistic.
Sure.
DC nobody has any illusions that DC represents anything having to do with the will of the American people in our timeline or this timeline.
Right.
So this is just fully reasonable. So now we're going to separate the video because that was like during our timeline, that was the war period. Now we're going to fast forward and we're going to do post-war period. And we're going to go until now.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So we're going to start it like this. Germany is going to start building up their colonies, which is, I think, 2 colonies in Africa, towards self-rule with supervision, right? Because now they're like, hey, we don't need to subjugate these people. We need these people to get on their own footing so they can do really well, but we're their partners because we helped them get there. So they'll trade with us. They'll do this. We don't, you don't got to rule.
This isn't like a puppet government like the U.S. does. This is, you rule yourself how you guys think is right, for the people. And
it's not what China does, where they say, "Hey, we'll build the harbor. You owe us this much money," and then you can't make the payment. They're like, "It's our harbor."
Yeah,
that's different too.
Right.
This is really like finding good young leaders in their country, and then giving them the training. Shoot them off to Germany. Give them all the greatest training you can.
Definitely.
And so basically, this starts to work over the course of years. This starts to work so well that the other members of the European coalition start following suit.
Like with their colonies.
With their colonies. So we see this happen with Britain and India in their African colonies, Belgian Congo. Like we start to see all these different European powers, and they're funneling all this money into Africa because their cities aren't destroyed, we'll just say. They don't got to rebuild their cities.
Right.
They're not at war.
They're not paying war debt.
Right. They're not paying war debt. They're not at war. They got all these economic things are just booming. Because imagine how big Britain is at this time. The resources are insane. As long as they're free the trade lanes are free, as long as they have good trading partners. In this scenario, they got great partners. So then they all start building up their colonies.
Yep.
Which means in India, either Gandhi wins or there's no need for Gandhi.
Okay. Interesting.
Because I know Gandhi was during this time, but during the time of the war, but it's like he's trying to get the British government to do something that in our scenario they're doing voluntarily. Now Britain wants a strong India ruling itself, who's closely allied with the European powers.
Sure.
Okay, now you want to do the next one? It's the Gaddafi one.
Oh yeah. Okay. So
this is your idea.
Yeah. So we're gonna have the USSR is gonna see the growing. The numbers are not going in their favor as far as how the world is set up and Africa thriving and all that. So they're sending in their people to try to subvert all this, and
like they did in our timeline.
Yeah, trying to convert places to communism instead of the path that they're on, and the European coalition is helping with stopping that from happening in Africa and like their colonies because they're heavily invested in having these people succeed. Then the people in our timeline, they end up getting embargoed to death or end up eventually getting assassinated and all that, who were actually trying for the people. None of that happens to them. So we had a video on Gaddafi, check it out if you want to hear the true story about him. But he was a dude that was really trying to make Libya great. And he was trying to...
He did make it great for that period.
Yeah, totally. And his vision was one currency for Africa to get away from the US dollar, and he was stockpiling gold and all that for the continent. And so in our timeline, we're going to say that instead of being held back by the Americans, that he was allowed to thrive. And he succeeds in his vision of all these countries in Africa being unified together, and him being their, I don't know if even leader or guide or whatever, and all these people are thriving under his, we'll say, rule.
Okay. Yeah. Just think about all the great people in history of these third world countries, because we keep them third world in our timeline.
Totally.
All of these leaders, like when I was reading Malcolm X, he was talking about these great African leaders. I've never heard any of these names, but if you were a black guy watching, you're like, oh, say the name, say the game of this guy, and this guy, those guys. I don't know their names, but those guys would all be living and they'd all be working towards the best interest of their people. It's what you want, and it's what I want. It's what any decent human being wants.
Right.
So anyways, so now USA I'm just going to say USA. I don't know why. USA forms the American coalition to spread freedom and democracy.
Nice.
So they perform several coups in South and Central America just to get everybody online. So now they end up with puppet regimes. Mm-hmm. In all of North and South America, with the exception of Canada. I'm not sure how that goes with the Canadians.
Because they were so tightly aligned with
they're one
Britain.
of the crown jewels in Britain's.
Right.
Britain. So maybe they're allowed to exit the European coalition and be in neutrality or something, just so that they don't get conquered. But it's like they want to share in the glory of what's going on over here, whereas U.S. is trying to send assassins up and try to kill everybody in their country who wants Canada for Canadians.
Right.
Well, all the important people, not just everybody, because we haven't been assassinated yet. So, get a couple hundred more followers and we'll see. Okay. Anyways. So, next one's yours.
All right. So, during this time, post-war, all the scientists and great minds that the United States and the USSR stole out of Germany post-war, the US was called Operation Paperclip, and they were stealing them from each other. Like they had agreements of who was going to get who, and those people were the ones that got the space race and the technological advances
in both countries.
Right. So now those people don't leave; they stay in Germany.
So you have all the smart people.
Right. So there is no Cold War because there's only one person that is the superpower.
One country, yeah.
And I'm not saying they don't have technology and all that, but I was just playing out in my mind, and I feel like Germany for a long time would be the only people with satellites in space until the other countries figured it out.
If they built the Autobahn,
Mm-hmm.
20 years later, there was no country with as good of a road system. And then that's when somebody caught up.
Oh, okay.
Just with laying road. It's been happening for thousands of years, laying road.
Right.
And then now do space. I told him, man, I mean, I don't know what you believe about space stuff, but say there was, a moon you could go to.
Okay.
I don't know. But I'm saying, like, I'm skeptical of everything. They'd be the moon by the end of the 40s. The 40s.
Or even if
they
it
were
was
building the rocket in the early 40s.
Yeah.
They were building UFOs. They were trying for flying saucers. They had a time travel machine. They were trying all the things.
Right.
Yeah.
And even you look at the advances that we made with part of their scientists, like going from the prop planes in the early 40s, and we had the SR-71 15 years later. And it is an insane aircraft. And what if all those people were together? What would they be creating? And
right.
Yeah, it would be.
And
incredible.
they'd just be giving unlimited resources thrown at them.
Oh, yeah. And encouraged to.
Oh, one thing we forgot to mention, which I want to add, because I just thought it was a good point, is that when the new leader of Britain flies into Germany, and then all the crowds are going, and there's they also see a beautiful big statue of the whistleblower.
Oh, okay.
Of the English whistleblower who did what's best for the one patriot in all of Britain that changed history, right in the middle of Berlin.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean?
Yeah, see, like you say that, and it makes sense with how much they revered like Jesse Owens, because he was great at this thing, and now there's a guy that did a great thing for his people. How much more would they be wanting to honor him?
Yeah. Okay. I just want to throw that into the early part.
So as Germany is technologically dominant from everyone else on the planet, they're sharing the kind of the fruits of that with the people in their coalition. So let's say they develop fusion power. They're not telling them how to do fusion power, but they're giving them the power. That makes sense. So they're maintaining control of the technology, and
they're not giving weapons to everybody,
right?
Because they're in control with the advanced. If your fighters are 3 versions better than the other fighters, you don't got to give those fighters away.
Right.
Just nobody's going to mess with your group because
you're going to get the fighters.
Yeah. So at this point, all of the Jews in the entire world are either in Palestine because they've fled the European coalition. They're in the USSR or they're in the USA. That's just it, And so basically, the Jews in Palestine have no support because there's no UN. At this point, there's still a League of Nations, but it's just a joke because who's in the League of Nations? The USSR, USA, everybody from the American coalition. No Japan, no China, no European, no African country. It's just your coalition at that point. It's not a worldwide organization. It's just your coalition. Sure. So its League of Nations has been reduced to nothing. There's no UN. So there's no support for the Jews. I mean,
for them having a homeland.
Yeah. Like, what's the U.S. going to do? Just everything's hostile in the Mediterranean. None of that's for you.
Right.
You can't. There's no way you can get around that.
And I don't think we mentioned it, but because the U.S. never went to war, they never ramped up to wartime production.
Right. And okay, that was a crucial thing, right?
Yeah.
When the European coalition was looking at supplying the petrol to Japan, they didn't want the U.S. because the U.S. has phenomenal resources as long as you don't get them ramped up. The U.S. might have went further into depression.
Oh, okay.
Because it was the wartime production that got them out of it. So it was all fake to begin with. The recovery. So anyways, the Arabs basically become enraged at some culminating event. We're going to assume some Jews do some things.
What they do.
That they typically always do because they're taught to from birth by their Talmud and their great culture. And so basically some culminating event happens and the Arabs form an organization called Arab League for Arabs. Do you know who it's for?
Arabs.
Okay. It's about Arabs for Arabs. Imagine Saddam Hussein, right?
Okay.
Other great leaders that I don't know the names of in the Middle East that the U.S. assassinated or killed or declared war on their country or killed hundreds of thousands of their civilians. Okay, just imagine. Well, that was just a Saddam reference, but and so basically the Jews have to flee to the USA, basically, from Palestine. And it's at this same time that in our timeline that the USSR starts punishing the Jews and getting them out, because the Jews had dominated Russian communism.
Mhm.
They had dominated it. They were all in charge. All the laws had like, you can only have one language. It's Russian, because we're Russian. You could all speak Yiddish, because the people making the laws were just Jews. You know, no religion for. I mean, if it's Judaism, you can do that. You know, and so this is how all the laws went. Eventually, it caught up to them, and they started getting kicked out of the country. Then there was the refuseniks who refused to leave, and they were like, "We're going to stay here and fight for Jewish whatever." Okay, so basically, the Jews from USSR are leaving at this point, and so they're going to the USA. So you know what that means in the USA?
Things are getting better.
Things are getting better. They have all the Jews.
Woo.
Yeah. So basically, the Arabs formed their own coalition at this point, and they get economic agreements with Africa, their neighbors, Europe, their neighbors, and now with the Japanese Empire.
Okay.
In this situation, I'm guessing in this situation, things just go really good for Japan. And they're just sitting there controlling massive swaths of China and Manchuria.
China never really rises to be a power.
Right, because they're suppressed by... And so the thing going on in our scenario in Japan is not related to the thing going on in Europe.
They're doing their own thing. It's just an economic thing. It's not ideological.
Yeah, they're doing empire. Theirs resembles a British empire during the time they were doing the colonizing, but just much more brutal.
Okay.
Because instead of doing it to small tribes, they're doing it to large populations in China. Okay. Go for it.
So at some point, the 60s, 70s, 80s, whenever, just kind of how it did in real life, the communism in the Soviet Union begins to fail.
What? It doesn't work?
It apparently never works.
Wow, amazing.
It's also never been done correctly, though.
And imagine they had no space race. They had no Cold War.
That's true.
No reasons to
do the extra spending and
all the
create
corruption, right?
Jobs or whatever and all that type of
Yeah.
thing. And so there's little value between the U.S. and the USSR, alliance at this point, because Soviet Union is doing so bad. And we end up with USA, with the advent of the internet, we end up with the United States making what we currently call the Great Firewall of China, but it's for America.
It's called the Freedom Firewall.
The freedom,
Guarantee you, it's the Freedom Firewall.
Or the Democracy Saver.
Yeah, yeah. The Galactic Democracy Saver.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So now that there's this great communication device, the people of the U.S. aren't allowed to see what is happening in the rest of the world. They don't want to see how all the great technology that Germany has made, or how happy the people are, and that there's no gay pride parades and just all the degeneracy and all that.
Right. Because they've also been fed like just huge lies, like maybe there was just this mass murder in Germany or something, but they've been feeding these lies
for decades.
And everybody over there just knows for decades and decades and decades that there's not one shred of evidence for any of this. So now you have to create the firewall. You can't even be shown a reality, right?
Right.
Because you're so brainwashed.
Totally. You wanna?
Shall I?
Yeah, go do it.
Because basically, I don't have the end of the story. Because you choose what happens to the USA. You choose today, and in this timeline, you would choose too. But the situation in the USA, in our fake scenario, and in the real life is analogous to each other.
Yes.
Both of them end up with just freedom. You got freedom to trans your kids. Your teacher can probably pretty soon just force your kids to get trans without your consent or even letting you know. And if you misgender them, like this, you see the world you're in. You see this stuff with the children, the trans stuff, the flags. You see where it's going. The communism, the stuff they're teaching in schools. You send your kid off, pay a bunch of money for education, and they come back completely brainwashed, pink hair.
Totally.
I don't even know the names. Gender fluid, non-binary. You know what I'm saying? This is insanity.
Right.
But in this world, because we're optimists, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we're optimists. If we're making the fantastic world, we want a great Africa. We want a great Europe. We want a great Asia. And I know we couldn't really pull it out because of the communism of the USSR in this scenario, and then the Japanese Empire, not,
Yeah.
But and then when it comes to the USA, you got to choose the future of the USA.
Totally.
And I hope it's not what it. I hope you choose that this is not it.
Right.
Because
That we're shooting for something better than this.
shooting for something way better.
Yeah.
And in our scenario, just think about birth rates in Europe and Africa in our scenario. Just think about it. They're fantastic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're just fantastic. They're nothing like it is today. And there would, there would be none of the immigration problems. Like, okay, if you just look at, say you live in Europe, we got some people who live in Europe, look at any of your problems. You would have none of those in this scenario. Absolutely not one of those scenarios. You wouldn't have the wartime scenarios that you have now. You wouldn't have the heating problems this winter that you're having right now because Germany's turned off all their nuclear or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You wouldn't have the immigrant invasion. You wouldn't have the LGBTQ. You just wouldn't have any of the things. You would have beautiful families everywhere.
Right.
Safe streets, Anyways, that's what I got.
Yeah. It's, I think there's a right way to do this. If this is just we tried to be realistic and tried to stay, somewhat feasible. And man, it was a cool little exercise. Let's talk through this. And
It was.
yeah, be interested to hear if you enjoyed this. And
I want to say one more
go
thing.
for it.
The entire thing that changed the entire world in our story was one human being.
That's true.
It was just one person. It was a Jack Texaco. Remember that guy?
No.
And he released the stuff. He was just this kid.
Oh yeah, that
and he
guy.
released the stuff about how we're lying about every statistic coming out of Ukraine. Just even Bradley Chelsea Manning, however you want to do that,
Right.
or Julian Assange, just one person. You can in Egypt. It was that guy who burned himself. Don't burn yourself to death. The fruit vendor who burned
Right.
himself. One person can make a difference. Do something.
It's amazing though.
Not something wild. Sorry.
Right. But those people that were whistleblowers in the real world, the people don't do anything about it.
I know.
It's an interesting. It takes the person, but it also takes the people to have some huevos.
And in our scenario, there was already this anti-war fervor.
Right.
So then you get this released, and then it just kept precipitating.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we're being optimistic.
Yeah. We want to believe that there's something better.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any comments below, we'd be interested to know if one part of it was completely illogical, like you don't think that it could ever get from here to here, or what was a better way that we could have, because there's a lot of ways you could do it, like you said.
Totally.
And then tomorrow we got another special video for you along the same line, and we'll hope to see you then.